Welcome to the gloomy arena that is IBM's The Smartest Link. My name's Nick Higham. Thank you very much for being here. The Smartest Link, it's a cross, I suppose, between the weakest link on BBC One and Just a Minute on Radio 4. And we hope you'll find it entertaining and informative in equal parts. We don't have Just a Minute regulars like Stephen Fry and Paul Merton on the panel, I'm afraid, but we do have some of the brightest and best from both the civil service and from IBM. And I have to say that our panelists, as you'll discover in a minute, are a good deal sharper than the hapless lot served up week after week for Anne Robinson to be nasty about. They're also a good deal more knowledgeable about delivering public services in a modern, joined-up and forward-thinking way. They're each going to speak for 60 seconds on a topic which we have given them, 3 topics in all. They don't have to manage that without hesitation, deviation or repetition, though we do hope that they will be succinct and to the point. None of them get voted off by their fellow contestants, and you'll find that I'm a lot nicer than Anne Robinson. But we do aim at the end of the session to find the smartest link. Why the smartest link? Well, it's a neat little tie-in with a phrase that IBM have come up with, which they call the Smarter Planet Initiative, which seeks to integrate information technology and the real world in clever, original, and useful ways. In other words, it's aiming to bring about, among many other things, smarter government. And there's no shortage of recent examples of this. I'll give you one from Belgium. It's called the Crossroads Bank for Social Security. It's a project which IBM were involved in, 42 different government services aimed at employers, brought together in a single point of contact, eliminating around 50 social security declaration forms. Last year, 23 million declarations in Belgium were made online. The initiative is said to have saved Belgian businesses an estimated 1.7 billion euros a year. You get the picture, you get the kind of thing. It is, incidentally, an initiative thought up as part of the wonderful Belgian government initiative known as the Kafka Plan, which is run by a government organisation in Belgium called the Administration Simplification Agency, which, believe it or not, does exactly what it says on the tin. How nice to find a government department whose name encapsulates its purpose so succinctly. Another initiative, putting government information and government services on Twitter. They're doing that in the US state of Rhode Island. The Treasury there provides real-time cash flow figures for the state. I can tell you that on Thursday, July the 2nd, general fund receipts in Rhode Island totaled $29,664,000, and general fund expenditures came to $33,585,000. And at that rate, you don't need to be a mathematical genius to work out that Rhode Island will be bankrupt by the end of the year. Here in the UK, we've got 1 or 2 examples of our own. I'll pick out one. It's called Southwest One. It's a joint venture between IBM, Somerset County Council, Taunton Deane District Council, and Avon and Somerset Police. And that now manages 1,400 of those authorities' employees, runs back office functions like finance, property, IT, procurement for all 3 of them. And they say it will save them £376 million over 10 years. Every case, you get the idea. The aim is to improve the service to the citizen, increase efficiency, whilst at the same time paying due consideration to concerns like security and privacy. To round off this short IBM sales pitch, here is an equally short video. statistic that's not in there, but I got this from IBM as well, is that before too long, the amount of digital data in the world will double every 11 minutes. A truly terrifying piece of information. So that gives you a flavour of why we're here. How are we going to make this work? Well, we have, as you can see, 4 panelists. They're all going to answer 3 questions each, as I say, in 60 seconds. And then we're going to ask you to vote on which you think is the best answer. We have a high-tech voting system. On your chair you will have found one of these, a little keypad, and you are going to enter A, B, C or D, according to which of our 4 speakers you think is the best. And I'm assured it works. Since the assurances come from IBM, I of course believe them. I suggested we should have a rehearsal, and I was told that that was technically unnecessary, but I realized that they'd missed the message. I wasn't worried about the technology, I was worried about you lot. But I'm assured that Whitehall's finest can master A, B, C, D, so we'll see when the time comes. When all 3 questions have been answered, we're then going to ask you a question, so you need to keep awake at the back. Where do you think the smarter government agenda should start and why? You might want to get thinking about that now. And we hope you'll have some better answers and cleverer suggestions than our panelists. And while you're making your contributions, we'll do a little sum and work out who the smartest link of our 4 panelists has been, according to you, the audience. The aim of the whole exercise is to spark some new ideas, some new ways of thinking, and I think we'll know if we've succeeded if you all leave this room today with at least one good idea of how you could do things in your area of work just that little bit smarter. So let's introduce our 4 panelists. Without further ado, I'm going to ask them to come up round the back of the stage here. And first, please welcome Jan Gower. She is the leader of IBM's civil government industry team. She works in every area of the company's business, consulting, outsourcing, hardware, software. She's spent 26 years as a consultant working with public sector organizations. Her CV includes stints at other consultancies like Coopers, Andersons, and Price Waterhouse. She's also the current president of the Management Consultancies Association. A quick round for Jan, please. We're delighted to have some very senior civil servants who have agreed to take part in this little parlour game with a serious edge, and one of them is our next panellist, Terry Moran. He was appointed first chief executive of the Pension, Disability and Carers Service just over a year ago. He's clearly brought his own clack with him. He started in the civil service as a clerical assistant at the DHSS back in 1977. He was private secretary to Sir Michael Bishar when Bishar was in charge of the Benefits Agency, and he ran the Disability and Carers Service and then was interim chief executive of the Pension Service before those 2 things were brought together. It's a rare example, I think, of a bit of joined-up personnel and human resources thinking on the part of the government. I do hope you've managed to get the back office functions working together and the IT. Our third speaker, also from a senior position in the public service, Fiona Nelthorpe. She is head of the Taxpayers Charter at HM Revenue and Customs. She started there as a filing clerk 26 years ago. She's never worked anywhere else except for a year-long job swap a couple of years ago with an IBM consultant, which obviously gave her a taste of life in the public sector and I suppose may help to explain how you got lured into doing this today. I noticed it wasn't a total job swap, though, because both you and your Oppo were turning up at meetings at HMRC. They got 2 for the price of 1.
Well, from time to time.
From time to time. We didn't applaud Terry. Let's applaud both Terry and Fiona. And finally, from IBM, Anu Kurmi. She is business leader for IBM at the Home Office and Ministry of Justice. I promised not to ask her anything about ID cards. I asked her how long she'd been at IBM. She said many years and left it at that. She started as a debt collector. I bet you didn't know IBM was in the debt collecting business, but they were once. She's worked in IBM's financial services practice before the public sector practice. She also runs IBM's Young Professionals Network, and she's part of the company's Women's Leadership Group. And she hasn't brought a clack with her, but she has brought her son, who is a civil service intern. Applause for Anna, please. So, you all ready for this? Jan, tell me you're ready for it. Good. Okay, we're going to take each of you asking the first question. We're going to take each of you answering that first question one by one. And question one is, how could more intelligent access to information help reduce the cost of public service delivery? Jan Gower, you've got 60 seconds. 30 seconds. Change the rules. You've got 60 seconds starting now.
Tempted to phone a friend, but
wrong programme.
It seems to me that information in government is something that we all give many, many times. So I think we could reduce the cost if we collected it once and then asked people if they're willing for us to use it, so that we don't actually keep asking people the same question again and again. However, if people weren't able to agree that their information can be used, we need to think of some different way of getting the government to be more effective in its use of information. I certainly think that the collection of information multiple times should really be one of the things we should attack.
And who do you think should do the collecting?
I'm not sure that it matters who does the collecting, provided that it's available when we need it.
Available and accessible and the source for all sorts of government agencies to make use of.
Yeah.
Okay, your 60 seconds are up. That was succinct and short and to the point. Thank you very much for that. Terry, let's put the same question to you. How could more intelligent access to information help reduce the cost of public service delivery?
Funnily enough, Jan has just said what I was going to say, but I'll build on it, because I think if we went down the path of collecting information once and using it appropriately for many appropriate circumstances that is in the interest of the citizen, we reduce the time that they need to spend interacting with public services, we save money for the taxpayer, and actually it's a sustainable consumption that people have to then make in accessing public services is reduced, so it's also good for the planet. I really think if we could go down this path, we give the option of people whether or not they want to opt in or opt out. To be perfectly frank, I think it really sort of bold and literal by saying, and those that don't want to use it, want to ensure it can work, they should have to pay for services in the way that they want them if it's not the most efficient way that we know we can deliver them. And I think on that basis, we have a very challenging opportunity, but it is an opportunity to do the right thing, not just by the planet, but by our citizens, by our taxpayers, and indeed the people who work in public service.
If it's such an obvious idea that both you and Jan have had it,
Yeah.
why hasn't it been done? Why aren't we already doing it?
Well, I think there are many reasons. One is that there is a great fear by some elements of society that by having all of that information in one place, it's a great risk to the individual. A lot of people, of course, assume that we do that already. And it's a curious thing that they thought we have an informed public, but not necessarily the majority of the public who have that concern, where the vast majority of people using our services think it's legitimate and reasonable that we would do some things to both help them and safeguard public money. We don't do that routinely. The other reason we don't do it is that it is very hard right now to incentivise in the individual silos of departments the right way in which you both fund what needs to be done at the right point and save over somewhere else where you don't have to do it. That is a very challenging thing.
I suspect that's something we may come back to again in this discussion. Fiona, question for you then. How would intelligent access to information help reduce the cost of public service delivery?
I've been thinking about intelligent access to information. You need to think about the customer base we're trying to get that information to and from. So very different approaches are needed depending on who it is you're trying to reach. So for instance, whilst I've been developing a customer charter for our department, I've needed to think about what our pensioners need. Very, very different information needs to those of our youth groups. So to get to our pensioners, the best way they like is to sit round a table, tell a story, have a cup of coffee and a jam and dodger. But for our youth groups, because they're much more interested in gaming technology. So for that, we used games and we used the online system to get to them. Normally we would expect to have 40 responses from what I would call our usual suspects, but as a result of using a different approach, we managed to get 36,000 youth engaged in HMRC and 1,900 responses from over 40 countries.
That sounds like a success. We've got more information, more people participating, but does it reduce cost? It sounds to me actually as if it might be potentially, this kind of bespoke information gathering for different demographic groups sounds to me potentially more expensive.
By going out and talking directly to the groups affected, we're able then to tailor our approach that's appropriate to them. So instead of a poor pensioner trying to phone up and deal with our contact centres and actually creating more work because they're not being able to get the support they need, by tailoring that approach to what their needs are means they're less likely to come into contact with us, and it will be a once and done.
Okay. Lastly then in this session, Anu Kurmi, how would you answer this question of reducing the cost of public service delivery with more intelligent access to information?
Built on what I've just heard, and my view was that I think you need to provide some service for the citizen, and also for those that acknowledging that you need to provide for those who don't have internet access today by providing access portals for those in places like supermarkets, post offices and other public facilities such as libraries and citizen advice bureaus are examples. And I think you also need to look at it slightly differently when you're looking at providing access to intelligent information. And you need to look at government employees as well and how they can be enabled to work from with more productivity and work from home and other government locations perhaps, saving things like travel time and cost.
That's a problem, isn't it? You mentioned at the very beginning, those who do not have access to the internet or can't afford it, predominantly the old, though there are also some very poor people and so on, those who are educationally disadvantaged. Everything that we do in the modern world seems to make life more difficult for them. They become a rather difficult, awkward group of people to deal with, but we can't ignore them.
Absolutely not, and I think we've just had recently the Digital Britain report produced, and that actually acknowledges that fact. And building on Fiona's point about when you're building self-service solutions and online solutions or looking at different ways of providing services, you are looking at the audience you're catering to. And I think for any solution that you're going to implement, you need to make sure that you are catering for the requirements of the individual and how you're best going to reach them and help them adopt the services you wish to provide for them.
Terry, quick question to you. You mentioned people being expected to pay if they weren't prepared to go the most cost-effective route. I wasn't quite sure whether you were talking about people who might have to pay extra in the, for you to gather information about them. I mean, if I don't want to go online,
Yes.
Is it going to cost me more?
No, that's not the point I'm making, because I think we've got to be an accessible service, meeting the needs of people who can't access what might be the cheapest or most convenient thing that most people use. What I'm thinking is that if there are people that can use your services in the most cost-effective way, who choose and opt not to, for whatever reason they choose to, why is it that the taxpayer should continue to subsidise people who can perhaps be more wealthy and use services at cheaper cost, but because they have a personal choice do not want to? I don't know whether that's something that, as a society, we can sustain forever and a day, particularly given the economic circumstances that we see ourselves in.
But presumably in your service, dealing with pensions, dealing with
Yep.
disabled people and so on, this is something you've had to think about very much.
Absolutely. We have to ensure that services are available to everyone, irrespective of their personal circumstances, because that must be something that government is there to do and proud to do. But the more that we do it for people that don't need to use those services, the less, with less money there is, that we're able to do to increase the value of the services to the people that need to rely on those more costly services. And the more that we get squeezed, I'm worried that it's that community that will be the most vulnerable in terms of the squeeze that we will face.
Okay, let's do a little bit of voting then, shall we? You've heard the 4 answers. Reduce the costs by getting information collected just once, though it's not clear who by. Get those, perhaps, who want to go by a different route to pay a little bit extra. Tailor your information gathering according to the kinds of people that you are gathering information from, kind of bespoke information gathering. And Anu's version, again, a wide range of routes to reaching your target audiences and also enabling government employees better. We would like to hear you, see you vote. I'm going to ask you to do that in a minute. Press button A if you think Jan's view is the best. B for Terry's answer, C for Fiona, and D for Anu. A for Jan, B for Terry, C for Fiona, and D for Anu. Would you please press your buttons now? end to come up with one or two questions, perhaps answers of your own. Question 2, and Jan, again, we'll start with you. What is the one radical change that you would make in the next 12 months to get government departments to collaborate more effectively?
Thank you. You might expect me to say this given I work for IBM, but I think we should give people in government departments some technology that enables them to collaborate more effectively. So things that the private sector use, such as instant messaging, collaborative software, that actually allows people who don't know each other to find each other. I'm sure most of you use these things in your private lives, but actually government is still struggling to enable people who work for government to use them because of various issues around the silos in government departments, which Terry referred to before. Last year at Civil Service Live, I think they had an idea about creating a government directory so that people could find each other. I think at the moment that still doesn't exist, although there have been steps made towards it. I do think the radical thing is to say this technology is available, it is a service that will be provided to you, here's how you use it, let's get on with it.
Do you think the objection is effectively a cultural one, silos and so on, or do you think it's a financial one? Is there a fear that enabling technology is inevitably going to be expensive?
I think it's one of those first mover challenges, which is that the infrastructure, lots of technology infrastructure out there in departments. It's a question of making sure that the particular collaborative softwares are available, but also that we go past the problem of paying per use. So an organisation will put it up to be used. It would reduce costs because it would reduce people's travelling time. People can get access to information more readily. It's just a question of making that judgment and getting on with it.
Okay, so there's a technological solution to the question of enabling greater collaboration. Terry, what is the one radical change you'd make to get government departments to collaborate more effectively? 60 seconds starting now.
It may not sound as radical as I think it actually would be, but I would like to change some of the funding arrangements that mean that instead of departments having their own individual pots for everything, where we've got initiatives that are about improving service to citizens in general and the public, I'd like there to be a single individual accountable who works and is accountable with the right authorities who operate across the relevant government department to make things happen with the relevant authority. What we have at the moment, and I'm privileged to be associated with an initiative called Tell Us Once, which is about trying to ensure that we use information effectively once across government, local and central. And the difficulty that we will have in making this work is not that it's a bad idea, it's not that customers don't want it, it's not that it's not going to save money, because it's going to do all of those things. It's because it will come up against the challenges and the culture that we have of individual departments only thinking they can do things in and around themselves.
When in fact we know that the circumstances of customers are such that they cross many boundaries.
And that's your time. And again, presumably you would say that it's a cultural, it's a defensive, proprietorial attitude on everybody's part. Nobody wants to cede anything to another department or to somebody else.
Everybody likes the idea. It's about what it might mean for the departments and the accountabilities. And where does the cost that you need to do it arise relative to where the benefits may arise, and who's going to then do it. But I think actually if we put enough incentives around it for the right reasons, which is not just about cost efficiency, but it is also about creating public service value, and you can be recognised for doing that, we might turn this tanker around.
Good luck with that. Fiona, let's have your suggestion. One radical change in the next 12 months, so the short term, to get government departments to collaborate more effectively. 60 seconds starting now.
On the stage, as I say exactly the same thing as Terry. It's a subject very, very close to my heart. If I ruled the world, the one thing I would change is our budgetary system. Instead of, as Terry said, individual departments bidding for individual funding, it would be so much better if Treasury looked at what we wanted to deliver. So, for instance, if we want to reduce child poverty, then let DWP, Child Support Agency, the Tax Credit Section, Revenue, Customs, educational skills, let's all get together, have a pot of fun where we can work as one and come up with a solution that's right for the children of our country, instead of all of us trying to deliver individual widgets according to whatever the budgetary constraints of what our departments have decided. I spent a year working in Child Support Agency, And I think that was the one thing we found the most frustrating, was that we all wanted to deliver the same thing, but actually everything was put in our way to stop us being able to do that, and it was so frustrating.
Do you think that the Treasury would be... You seem to be suggesting we need a sort of honest broker to run this. Is the Treasury the right people, right department to put in charge of this, or should it be perhaps something that changes from project to project?
Well, the Treasury are the people who allocate the funding, and they're the ones that will decide what our PSAs are in the first place. So it would be the sensible place for that to sit. They're working with the Chancellor, with the Prime Minister, and so they need to be guiding what the government is trying to deliver, so that we're delivering what the government wants us to.
So hearing a civil servant, senior civil servant, suggest even more power to the Treasury. It's a bit like turkeys voting for Christmas.
Not more power to the Treasury. We know what we're trying to deliver. It's just we're all trying to deliver it in our individual ways instead of a joined up way. And so by having one pot of money, and it's not saying the Treasury is saying we must do that, it's saying here's a pot of money, it is for the purpose of reducing child poverty, or the Tell Us Once project, alleviating the bereaved and helping and support them. Let's all work together and find the right solution that works for the country.
Okay, thank you very much. And finally, Anu, one radical change next 12 months to get government departments collaborating more effectively. Answer in 60 seconds starting now.
I'm really glad I crossed up my notes about budgets, so I focused a little bit on radical. I like the idea of having something like a government campus. The idea is sort of based on, we follow on to something like Civil Service Live, where you are all getting together and learning about each other's organisations, and it would maintain itself throughout the year. It would be a branded initiative for government collaboration online and face-to-face. And I like the idea that it would work across government departments. You could start by having a cross-government jamming session where you identify maybe the top 10 initiatives that would enable better collaboration. You would then have a team from different teams that are working on those initiatives brought together from cross-government departments to implement and deliver these initiatives. An obvious example to me is, a simple one, is standardising access to government buildings.
Excellent. Those are some very concrete suggestions. Anu, thank you very much for that, and done in less than 60 seconds as well. Let's move on then to voting again. You've heard 4 suggestions. Give them technology, says Jan, to enable collaboration. She would say that. She comes from IBM. Terry says change the funding arrangements to make joint initiatives possible. Fiona goes further and says not only change the funding system but put the Treasury in charge of it. And Anu says create a government campus, and Civil Service Live, this event might be one possible model for that, to bring together people from lots of different areas to work together in a sort of brainstorming session. So let us hear what you have to say. Pick up your voting buttons. A for Jan, B for Terry, C for Fiona, D for Anu. Anybody having trouble with this technology? Everybody manage the voting? Good. Excellent, right. We'll see. I'm sorry to break this to you, but we're only going to tell you at the end who is the smartest link. We're not going to tell you who the dumbest link is. That was the deal. The only way we got them to participate was by promising to keep the actual scores private. Okay. On to the third question, final question 3. How would you make government smarter in its dealings with citizens? Jan, you've got 60 seconds on this, starting now.
Make government smarter in its dealings. Well, I think I'd start by looking from a citizen outwards. My experience of working around government for a number of years is that in general, we start from what does government want, as opposed to what does the citizen need. And I think a lot of people in government departments are trying very hard to deliver what the citizen needs, but most of their systems and processes are designed looking at it from the other way. So I think the most radical suggestion I can think of is that all the design processes look at, from the citizen's point of view, what is the need from an end to end. So how many times do you need to interact with a particular citizen around the various events in their lives, which I think is where Tell Us Once works, but I think it needs to be a more fundamental design principle around how government interacts with citizens. And I would include in that looking at how all government local services, which is local government, central government, the NHS, because most citizens have no idea.
Where the boundaries of government are.
Indeed.
And I think we need to recognise that in the design process.
Your 60 seconds are up. Is this something you think that government, where government could learn from the private sector?
Yeah, I think so, because if you look at how people like Amazon design how they do business with people like you and me, they put a huge amount of effort into looking at how their customers operate, how they're segmented into buying behaviours, and they design their systems around those things to capture the most that they can. I mean, they have obviously a profit motive involved, but they really focus on that as part of their so I think designing from the citizen outwards.
Yeah, truly customer-centric, truly citizen-centric. Terry, same question to you. How would you make government smarter in its dealings with citizens? Should we perhaps think of them more as consumers? 60 seconds, starting now.
I'll start because of the citizen and consumer, whatever you want to call it in the C's, but I think we need to get into perhaps an approach which is, instead of starting with solutions, we start with the problem and invite people to tell us how we might go about solving the problem. An example of that, where I think the government made a bit of progress, and it was due to the service that were involved, is when we were all facing a pensions crisis, and government didn't know what to do. It actually went about a huge consultation. Now, actually, I think with the technology that exists today, we can have very meaningful consultation, very widespread, without relying on this type of event, for example, where you can get views and ideas and contributions and challenges to what some of those problems might be. We'll never get a single view. But I do think if we start by posing the problem, not just by thinking we know the answer, we might make a very big difference and get buy-in.
That sounds fun. I'm slightly worried about the use of that word consultation, though, because it often, particularly if you speak to journalists, is a rather dirty word in politics and government, a sort of euphemism for not doing very much, really.
And I can understand that, and that starts again with how authentic are we going to be if we're going to do it, because it won't survive otherwise. And the danger is that by using the word in the way you've just challenged me, when I'm using it, I believe it's on the basis that we want to genuinely hear ideas to inform the way we go forward. The fact that you may have views that suggest that that might not have been the way it was used, it's worrying.
Okay, Fiona, question for you. How would you make government smarter in its dealings with citizens? My book, Government is Singular, its dealings, but on the slide there, it's government's plural, their dealings. You've 60 seconds, starting now.
I think we need to get much smarter at joining up our services. It doesn't matter what's happening behind the scenes. We've all got aging legacy systems that we can't change. They're creaking, they're old, they were built in the 80s. And I know Jazz do their best to solve those, but the world's not going to change overnight. I was very fortunate a year ago to go out to Canada and see a piece of innovative work that they were doing called Service Canada. And what they've done, they've set up a new department, and that department provides a joined-up service to the citizen. So when the citizen comes in, the pensioner comes in, it's the advisor who will manage all of those processes behind the scenes, and they don't need to see that. Now, to do that, what they did, they went around the world, they found what was best practice, they took segmentation right away from DWP and from ourselves, but they built on that, they took it a stage further and said, okay, here's our segmentation, what are we going to do with that? Very, very impressed with the work they've done, and they've certainly been able to reduce their costs dramatically over the last year by just providing the citizen with what they need, as opposed to expecting them to run around to each one of us separately to find a solution.
One of the things that struck me when I was doing the background reading for this and reading a number of IBMs, but also some things from other people, was that if you concentrate on joining up at the customer-focused, citizen-focused end, you often end up improving collaboration and greater joining up behind the scenes. It can actually stimulate people to work more collaboratively across agencies and so on in the background. Is that your experience?
That is so, and the Tell Us Once project that Terry was talked about is exactly that. People then understand, the staff understand the issues from the other department's perspective, and it stops becoming, oh, they're doing that for that reason. They understand why they're doing it and start working together to find the solution.
Okay, Fiona, thank you very much. Finally then, how would you make government smarter in its dealings with citizens? Anu, you have 60 seconds starting now.
So I'll take a slightly different tack again. I think there are already some great initiatives that government's engaged in, and I think examples that come to mind are the DVLA car tax online. You've got the planning portal, you've got DEFRA, sound mapping, noise mapping, and NHS Online. So I think there's great things that are already being done by government. I think government doesn't always have to reinvent itself, and sometimes you need to keep things simple and easy for you. If you're doing good things, build on those as well, not try and do everything differently. And I think there's a great opportunity for government to leverage what it's doing, use the winning teams who are delivering these fantastic solutions to the citizen, and do more of the same with the other services that the citizen would value.
Fiona mentioned something which I suspect is a widespread problem, that is legacy systems. How far do they get in the way when you're trying to pursue these smarter government initiatives?
Well, I think it's interesting you ask that, because I think it's not just government who suffers from legacy systems, all customers do, large organisations. And there are solutions whereby with the
advances in technology, you can build on legacy systems, or if they're fit for purpose, there is no need to replace them, and you gradually evolve them or displace them with other smarter solutions. So I think the view that we always have to replace a legacy system unless there is something better there or you need to do something differently, you don't always have to do that. I think you can work around some of those things sometimes, and where you can't, then you have that need to deliver new solutions, but maybe incrementally with incremental benefit. So you are developing a sustainable program of activity.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you to all our 4 panellists. Now, one final round of voting. Of the 4 that you've heard, Jan suggests start from the citizen and work back from the citizen. Terry suggests more in the way of consultation. He insists meaningful consultation. Fiona, take a leaf out of Canada's book and start joining up the agencies themselves. And Anu suggests that actually we're doing a lot of this already. What we should do is build on what we're doing already, things like the DVLA car tax and NHS Online. Which of them do you like? A, B, C, or D? What do you want to do about that, chaps? Hands up, all those who noticed that we'd switched the order of the names and that. The 4 of you did. Did anybody else? Did anybody? No. Right. Okay. In that case, we will ignore what it said on the slide, and we will take those who pressed button A with apologies to those bright few in the front row who spotted the problem. We'll take those who pressed button A as voting for Jan, and so on, as we did in the previous ones. And before we do this again tomorrow, we'll get the slide changed. Right. While we're doing a little bit of totting up in the back there, let's have the house lights up a little if we can, please. And I warned you at the beginning that we were going to ask you for a few of your suggestions. What we want to know, essentially, big, bold, broad question: where do you think that the smarter government agenda should start, and why? By all means, use your own experience. There are ladies in the hall with microphones. The ladies with the microphones would like to stand up, and I would like to see some hands. And there's a hand there, and normal rules apply. Tell us your name and which department you work for. Just gentleman there. Anybody else want to get in? I'm blinded by the lights. Lady down here in the front row, and then gentleman in the back row. Yes, sir.
Hi, my name's Ian Gibbons. I work for Department for Work and Pensions. I was interested to listen.
Moran Clack, are you?
No, because I'll probably have a pop at Terry now because of his consultation idea. What we were talking about those radical ideas, and Terry talked about consultation, but I think about my own life and interacting with technology, and the biggest thing that's made a difference to my life is, I'm sad to say, Sky Plus. And Sky Plus has stopped me watching adverts and means I can watch more football and more rugby, speak to my children less, and occasionally grunt at my wife. But
Is this furthering the smarter government agenda?
Yeah. Well, the point I'm trying to make is I didn't know that I needed Sky Plus. Yeah. And if somebody had asked me what could make a difference to your life in terms of watching TV, it was that some brilliant, bright guy invented this thing called Sky Plus, and then somebody showed it to me. Yeah. And I think great ideas are often very simple, but they're done by imaginative, innovative people. I'm not one of those.
But it's a two-way street, isn't it? You have to be open to the ideas.
Yeah.
Institutionally, the civil service, the public sector has to be open to people who come to them with bright ideas like that.
I think that's a valid point, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Lady down here in the front row, then the gentleman at the back.
Hi, I'm Margaret Haig from...
It is working, yes?
Good. I'm Margaret Haig from the Ministry of Justice, and I think probably the criminal justice system is one area where we're really struggling to deal with legacy systems. I worked in the Crown Court, I've worked in the probation office, two completely different computer systems, and I think actually working with the private sector to improve our IT systems is something that we just have to do, which will help with the information sharing, improving the service delivery, making sure we don't let people out of prison who we shouldn't let out. So I think really tackling IT in the criminal justice system is something that's really important.
Are you just thinking there of narrowly making sure that you get the best IT systems from private sector suppliers, or are you thinking also of learning lessons from people in the private sector who are doing similar things? I'm trying to think of an example, and I can't think of a private sector company that does the same sorts of things as the Crown Courts. But I imagine there are private sector companies which face some at least of the same sorts of issues and same sorts of problems that the Crown Courts face.
I'm sure there are, and I'm thinking quite broadly and learning lessons and, you know, using that technology. I'm sure sort of debt collection agencies probably use similar systems to the county court, for example. So I think we can definitely learn the lessons, but it's a huge system, the criminal justice system.
And do you detect a resistance among your colleagues in the department as a whole to doing that?
I don't think there's any resistance at all. There's just no money.
No money. How often has one heard that? Gentleman in the back row. Anybody else? Yes, lady in the front row after that.
Hello, James Adutt from the Department for Work and Pensions. I listened to Steve Hare from the Northern Ireland Civil Service this morning, and he made a comment. If you were going to get some consultants into a department to design a system, you wouldn't then expect another department to get consultants in to design a similar system and so on. You'd do it once and pay for it once. There are lots of systems that we have, for example, systems about document retention, systems about management personnel and pay, systems about staff directories, information. But it seems to me all departments design their own, and usually not very well because they're not properly road tested with the staff. I think we need a single system, interconnected for all departments and properly tested out before it's put into effect.
That worries me as a citizen, as a consumer, because everything one hears about IT in the public sector is that the bigger and more complex and more ambitious the system, the more likely that it won't do what it says on the tin and that it will have cost far more and taken far longer than everyone expected.
Possibly, but at the moment I think we have 20 systems which all take longer and cost more. So I'm not sure that that's better.
Jan Gower, why does that happen?
Actually, I'm grateful for the question because I think if John Suffolk was here, the government CIO, he'd be talking to you about app stores now, which is an idea around making applications which government has paid to develop being used in one department, making them available to others. So standard applications which you can then build from as opposed to starting from scratch. I think that's a good start. I think the question about government IT and why does it go wrong is a challenging one. There are all sorts of issues around it, including the fact that in general it's very difficult in government to say I'll go for 80% of what I want rather than 100%, because in general most people want 100%. Most people's experience would be in the private sector, if you go for 80%, you'll get 80% and you'll have the best practice processes engaged in that. It's very difficult in government to say that you have standard processes and that you will keep to them. So it's very difficult to implement what in the commercial sector you call standard off-the-shelf packages.
Terry, do you agree with that? Too much emphasis on 100% delivery, bespoke packages and all the rest of it?
We've had our fingers burned too many times. So there's a lot of sense in the question. There's no doubt about how we learn and go forward. I know that there is this popular perception because it serves the media, because they don't like writing stories about the things that have gone well, and so they don't appear. But, you know, I could mention the customer information system. It is the biggest biographic database in the country holding 90 million records of people who are alive and who have passed away. And that was built in the last few years, and you've not heard that on the front pages as a result of a disaster. I could go on. There are some great examples about where we've done it well. Regrettably, there are too many examples where we've done it badly. But the work about ensuring that we actually apply more to what we have built to the future going forward is a very good example. And one more recent one is that the customer account management that is built inside the Department for Work and Pensions to serve pensioners and people approaching pension age was itself the basis on which a new system was built for the employment and support allowance that the government introduced for welfare reform purposes.
So that's the sort of example of the sort of
Exactly.
thing that the questioner was talking about. Lady down the front.
Courtney from the DWP, part of Terry's support network here. But what I was going to say...
any of these people.
It's not convincing, Terry.
I was going to say that for us to get smarter, we have to take the barriers away for innovation. We have to make innovation a safe thing for government. In addition to ring-fencing funding, so those decisions get easier, and starting from the citizens' need and letting them generate the ideas of what they need from us. We also have to tackle two things, I think. One is the risk of failure and the political risk that carries for ministers. There has to be some safe way to pilot things and prototype things. And the other big barrier, as I see it, is performance targets and measures. Because there is always the risk that if you try something new, it's going to impact on your performance against your targets, and you're going to have to publicly report on that, and then the front page of the papers are going to be covered with that disaster. So there has to be some way of creating incubation space that allows innovation to flourish, that takes those things out of the standard reporting mechanisms that the public sector labours under.
Anu, does that tally with your experience? Do you find there is a sort of resistance to innovation and a fear of risk among the people you deal with?
I think yes, because I think it's very difficult. I mean, even when people do want to embrace innovation, it's very difficult to do it in an environment where you are also being held to account. And unless those considerations, as Catherine says, are taken on board, how do you do that? And it is a challenge for government, and it is a challenge that I don't think they quite know how to address. I think you've had some really good initiatives where you've had the DEFRA Innovation Centre, for example, where they have tried to develop the model and the culture, because culture is a big part of this, to adapt and brainstorm new ideas and new innovations. So I think you've had success in doing that, but it's not mainstream, and it's not for these complex systems that are at the heart and the core of public service delivery.
I wonder, Fiona, Terry, if one of you wants to answer this, I wonder whether partly the problem is politicians who often are looking for quick results and are not often prepared to wait long enough for systems and ideas to be properly piloted and tested. There's a terrible tendency to rush them in as soon as possible.
It's human nature, though, isn't it? They're there for a very short time. And so they need to have something to show that their time has been well spent. So that we're constantly going to be blighted by the short-termism approach to let's find something quick, let's find something that that can show that I'm a fabulous minister, and to get someone to actually think, well, let's do nothing whilst I'm in power, and let's just all sit down and we'll plan for someone else to take all the glory in 10 years' time. It's a very, very hard thing for a minister to do.
Terry?
I have nothing to add to that. My head of communications.
Are you his head of communications?
No.
One last question.
Zita McMillan also from Department of Work and Pensions. Sorry, Terry. It's just an observation and building on a point that Catherine made. Having just joined from the private sector, I'm amazed at how inward-looking and sort of lacking in pride we are as a group of people about how many fantastic innovations there have been and how good we all are at doing our jobs. And this idea that the private sector holds all the answers is completely and utterly wrong, because it doesn't, and there's a lot of things that the private sector gets spectacularly wrong, but they're not on the front page the whole time, and our public accountability is sometimes what holds us back. And I think to build on Catherine's point of risk, my mindset is very much let's look at the benefit and therefore let's think about risk as part of the benefit rather than let's always focus on risk and that then stops us doing anything.
Okay, I said that was the last one. I'm going to take one more from the gentleman over there, and then I'm afraid we really must bring this to a close.
Hello, I'm Wes Robinson from the Highways Agency. I can't claim credit for the suggestion that I'm going to make because I heard it earlier, and that was that we should have a department for young people. And the suggestion was that it should be for young people and by young people. And when we're talking about innovation, it doesn't happen overnight. So what we need to do is to cultivate the next generation of people, educate them, make sure that they're employed, and make sure we can use the best of them in the civil service so that we can overcome some of these issues that we've been talking about today. Because colleague talking about Sky Plus earlier, new technology to him, kids have been doing that for years. You know, if you want to get a video working, you ask a 5-year-old, everybody knows that. They're the ones that use the social networking, the latest technology. They're the ones that could push it through and make us smarter government.
Could play havoc with civil service career structures, couldn't it? But yes, what a nice idea. Thank you very much indeed for all your suggestions. Let me leave you, finally, with news about who our smartest link is today. And despite the presence of the meringue clerk from the Department of Work and Pensions, I can tell you that today's smartest link is Fiona Nelthorpe. Fiona, thank you very much. Thank you to all our 4 panellists. Thank you to you for listening, for voting, and for your questions and comments. And enjoy the rest of Civil Service Live. Goodbye.